Maybe some of you don't like sports at all. If so, it's cool. This conversation is going to be fine. But maybe some of you do like sports. And maybe some of you get a little bit weird about it. I don't think I get a little bit weird about it. I think maybe I get a lot weird about it. I don't know. I'm doing better. I'm trying to relax more. I used to really, really, really care. And now I think I just really care about my sports teams doing well. But one of the byproducts for you and for me, if you care at all about any sports team, is not just love. Sure, you love your team, but it's also hatred. There's some team out there with perfectly nice people on it, with perfectly nice fans who are all just living their lives and trying to get by and hoping for a little bit of joy here or there when their team does well. They're out there, they're rooting for that team, but you hate that team and you wish ill on that team in every way. Maybe not like violence, but you revel in their humiliations and you dislike that rival as hard as you know how to dislike them. And maybe it all stems from them beating your team one time a really long time ago. Maybe it all stems from a few jerk fans who shot off their mouths in your moment of pain after their team beat you. I don't know. I'm not mocking you. I'm not judging you. I completely get it. I feel it. And I think that we live in a very happy time when those rivalries are something that for us are largely confined to sports teams. Because I think that a lot of people throughout human history, maybe most of them, didn't have that luxury. And their rivalries were with people who at one point invaded their land and conquered them and destroyed their stuff and did horrible things to people. And I think the people in the Old Testament, the descendants of Abraham, the Hebrews, the Israelites, the Jews, they had that kind of rivalry with some people. And it's interesting because they had some local rivals who they felt constant tension with. I think of the Agagites, for example. That bitter age-old rivalry factors heavily in what's about to happen as we get into the book of Esther more deeply here in a little bit. But also there are rivalries that are bigger, that are outside their own time zone. God's people had serious gripes with Egypt from time to time. They were rivals, like little brother rivals, nipping at the heels of Assyria. But still, they really resented Assyria, and their deepest resentment was for the Babylonians. Why? Well, because there's this whole saga in the Old Testament that you can see coming from a mile away. I mean, it's like a truck stalled out on the train tracks, and that train has only got a quarter mile to slow down. It's going 70 miles an hour. It's going to hit the truck. And it hasn't happened yet, but it's like Schrodinger's smashed truck. It's basically already done. It's just time-space hasn't quite caught up with reality yet. And that's the inevitability. That's how it felt throughout the Old Testament as the mega power that is Babylon gains its footing, gains its momentum, fends off its rivals with the help of the Medes and old goofball king Astyages. The more Babylon gets traction, the more the people of Judah, the people of Jerusalem, are like, dang it. And sadly for them, this is confirmed by God. The prophet Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, the same one who gives us Lamentations, he tells his people, hey, Babylon is going to show up. They're going to defeat us. They're going to destroy us. They're going to take us into exile. And here's how you should live while you're in exile. Like, as much as you're not going to like it, you should live for the benefit of that city that is home to the people who are going to destroy us. And Jeremiah turns out to be right. He's predicting that stuff just a little bit before that Battle of Carchemish in 605. He's predicting that stuff just a few years before Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians show up. But he's not the only prophet who is eyeballing Babylon and who has come to believe what God is saying, that these evil Babylonians are going to be the one that come along and wreck them. Famously, Habakkuk sees it the same way. I say famously, like, oh yeah, everybody is into Habakkuk. It's everybody's favorite book. Okay. Sometimes the book of Habakkuk gets a little bit forgotten, but I think it's an absolutely keen book that's very interestingly organized. And the book of Habakkuk is almost surely written as the campaign that will lead to the Battle of Carchemish is unfolding. As all the big forces are converging on that decisive battle, Habakkuk is already convinced that it's going to be Babylon who emerges from all of this, and it's going to be Babylon who comes and punishes us. And Habakkuk raises an objection about that. He first of all says, if you were going to judge us, why did you allow us to keep doing bad things? Why didn't you just stop us from behaving so badly so that you wouldn't have to judge us? And then God answers that. And he's like, well, because that's what you picked, and I'm raising up Babylon to come and judge you. And then Habakkuk's like, what the heck, God? But how can you take a people that is worse even than us? Like, we're bad. I agree. I concede. But how can you take somebody who's worse than us and punish us with them? You should be punishing them. And God is like, yeah, they're going to get theirs. But first, they're going to be my instrument of judgment against you. And then by the end of the book, it's kind of wild. Habakkuk is like, okay. Yeah, all right, that makes sense. I guess those are really good answers. Thanks, God. And he just moves forward doing what he's supposed to do as a prophet. I think it's an absolutely fantastic book. But then as we move forward against the backdrop of history and the unfolding of the global events you and I have been tracking in anticipation of diving deep into the book of Esther, we go over to the book of Isaiah, and Isaiah's got a ton to say about Babylon. In chapter 45 and through the next few chapters, we get a couple of really big prophetic announcements having to do with the stuff that you and I are watching unfold as we're trying to break down and understand this volatile moment in the history of the world in the 6th century and the late 7th century. And Isaiah specifically says, there's going to be a guy named Cyrus who comes and judges the instrument of God's judgment, that being Babylon, and who is used by God to liberate his people. And the language that is heaped by the prophet Isaiah, or God through the prophet Isaiah, in this passage is probably the kindest language that gets poured out on any Gentile character in the Old Testament, any foreign king. Listen to this, Isaiah 45. We've been talking about Cyrus. Well, guess what? The Bible talks about Cyrus as well. This is what the Lord says to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I take hold of, to subdue nations before him and to strip kings of their armor, to open doors before him so that gates will not be shut. I will go before you and will level the mountains. I will break down gates of bronze and cut through bars of iron. I will give you the treasures of darkness. I mean, he's talking to Cyrus here. This is a really nice prophecy. I will give you the treasures of darkness, riches stored in secret places, so that you may know that I am the Lord, the God of Israel, who summons you by name. For the sake of Jacob, my servant, of Israel, my chosen, I summon you by name and bestow on you a title of honor, though you do not acknowledge me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. Apart from me, there is no God. I will strengthen you, though you have not acknowledged me, so that from the rising of the sun to the place of its setting, men may know there is none besides me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. I mean, when I was a kid, we sang a song in church that had words from that exact passage. That God is saying that he's going to make himself known to the nations by the actions of Cyrus. And he's further saying that Cyrus doesn't even know who God is. This is such an interesting dynamic. And this character that maybe for the last week or so has been feeling to you like someone we've been talking about a little too much. And like, when do we get to the Esther part? I want to talk about the girl. She seems real cool. I totally get that impulse. But this Cyrus character, part of the reason we're talking about him so much is because he's interesting and he's important and he moves the whole story forward and gets us to Esther. But the other part of the reason that we're talking about him so much is because he is a prominent, significant, theological, biblical character. He comes up over 30 times, which ranks him shockingly high among the most mentioned characters in the entire Bible. All right, I'm looking at the clock here. I got a lot more that I want to cover about where Cyrus and Babylon and Cyrus's eventual release of the Jews to go back home fits in with the Bible and the history stuff we're looking at. And I'm having a lot of fun. I'm making that gesture where my fingers overlap and they go together. And I'm like, look, it all fits, lock and key. I don't think I want to rush to cram this into one conversation. So I'm going to pick up right where we left off next time around. And without just reading the entire Old Testament at you, hopefully we can look at a few of these select passages and really get a sense of this very grand payoff to the prophetic books of the Old Testament and this whole narrative. We're not just looking at this history because I really like history and because I think it's a juicy story. I mean, that's a nice bonus. And we're not just looking at this history because it pays off nicely in Esther, though that's a really key component of why we're looking at it. There's a much grander payoff to all of this, specifically in the book of Esther, but also in the Old Testament, which is situated squarely in real history as well. More on that stuff tomorrow, my friends. I'm Matt. This is the 10 Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.